Lieutenant Commander Jack Morrison had always been different from other Navy pilots. While his colleagues followed orders without question, Jack possessed an insatiable curiosity that often got him into trouble. On that foggy Tuesday morning in September 1962, as he prepared for what seemed like a routine reconnaissance mission over the Pacific, he had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The briefing room at Naval Air Station Alameda buzzed with the usual pre-flight chatter. Captain Bradley stood at the front, his weathered face serious as he outlined the mission parameters. The pilots were to conduct standard surveillance flights along the California coast, photographing shipping lanes and monitoring Soviet submarine activity during the height of the Cold War. Nothing unusual, nothing that would raise eyebrows in Washington. Jack listened intently, but something felt off. The mission coordinates seemed oddly specific, directing them to avoid certain areas of the ocean that had never been restricted before. When he raised his hand to ask about these no-fly zones, Captain Bradley's response was curt and dismissive. "Those are classified waters, Morrison. You don't need to know why." After the briefing, Jack approached his longtime friend and fellow pilot, Lieutenant Tom Rodriguez. They had flown together since their academy days, and Tom knew Jack's tendency to question everything. "Don't go looking for trouble," Tom warned, adjusting his flight suit. "We've got enough real problems with the Soviets breathing down our necks." But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something important was being hidden from them. As he walked to his F-8 Crusader, he noticed several unmarked aircraft on the far side of the airfield, surrounded by personnel he didn't recognize. Their uniforms bore no insignia, and they moved with the purposeful efficiency of people involved in highly classified operations. The takeoff was smooth, and Jack found himself flying in formation with 3 other pilots toward their designated patrol area. The Pacific stretched endlessly below them, its blue surface broken only by the occasional merchant vessel or fishing boat. For the first hour, everything proceeded according to plan. They photographed the assigned coordinates, radioed in their positions, and maintained strict radio discipline. Then Jack noticed something that would haunt him for months to come. Far below, partially obscured by morning haze, he spotted what appeared to be a massive underwater disturbance. The water was churning in perfect circular patterns, unlike anything caused by natural currents or marine life. More disturbing was the fact that this disturbance was located precisely in one of the restricted zones they had been ordered to avoid. His training told him to ignore it and continue with the mission. Protocol demanded that he follow orders without deviation, but Jack's conscience wouldn't let him simply fly past what could be evidence of enemy activity, or worse, some kind of accident involving American personnel. Against direct orders, he broke formation and descended for a closer look. What he saw through his camera lens defied explanation. The water disturbance wasn't random at all. It formed geometric patterns that seemed almost artificial, as if something massive was moving beneath the surface in a controlled manner. Through the clear water, he could make out dark shapes that were far too large and too regular to be whales or submarines. Jack's heart raced as he realized he was witnessing something that wasn't supposed to exist. The shapes below moved with mechanical precision, and occasional flashes of metallic surfaces caught the sunlight filtering through the water. This wasn't Soviet technology, at least not any Soviet technology he had been briefed about. The scale and sophistication of whatever was down there suggested capabilities far beyond what either superpower publicly acknowledged possessing. As he circled for a better angle, his radio crackled to life. "Crusader 7, you are ordered to return to formation immediately." The voice belonged to Captain Bradley, and its tone left no room for argument. "Repeat, return to formation and proceed to base. Do not deviate from flight plan." Jack knew he should comply, but the scientist in him couldn't resist taking just a few more photographs. He had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could change everything they thought they knew about naval capabilities and underwater technology. His camera clicked rapidly as he documented the impossible scene below. "Crusader 7, this is your final warning. Return to formation or face court-martial upon landing." The threat was real, and Jack knew Captain Bradley well enough to understand that he meant every word. Reluctantly, he pulled his aircraft up and rejoined his squadron, but his mind raced with questions about what he had witnessed. During the flight back to base, he remained silent on the radio, processing the implications of his discovery. Upon landing, Jack was immediately escorted to Captain Bradley's office. The older man's face was grim, and two men in civilian clothes sat quietly in the corner taking notes. Jack had never seen them before, but their presence suggested that word of his unauthorized deviation had already reached higher authorities. "Morrison," Captain Bradley began, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You've put me in a very difficult position. What you saw out there is classified at the highest levels. There are people in Washington who would prefer that certain discoveries never see the light of day." Jack's mind reeled. So there was something to hide. His deviation hadn't been random curiosity. He had actually uncovered something significant. The question now was whether he would be allowed to pursue the truth or if his career would be quietly ended, to protect whatever secret lay beneath those Pacific waters. The two civilians finally spoke, their words measured and threatening. They explained that Jack's photographs would be confiscated, his flight logs would be altered, and his official report would reflect nothing more than a routine patrol mission. Any attempt to discuss what he had seen would be considered an act of treason. As Jack walked back to his quarters that evening, his camera film confiscated and his future uncertain, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would not be silenced. Whatever was hidden beneath those waters was too important to be buried by bureaucrats and military officials more concerned with maintaining secrets than protecting national security. The young pilot had no way of knowing that his decision to investigate further would lead him into a world of government conspiracies, advanced technology beyond imagination, and dangers that would test every skill he had learned as a naval aviator. His journey to uncover the truth had only just begun. Jack Morrison spent the next 3 weeks walking on eggshells around Naval Air Station Alameda. Every conversation felt monitored. Every glance from superior officers seemed loaded with suspicion. The two civilians who had questioned him after his unauthorized flight appeared periodically around the base, always watching, always taking notes. Their presence served as a constant reminder that his discovery had rattled people in very high places. During this tense period, Jack threw himself into research, spending his off-duty hours in the base library and local universities, searching for any information about unusual naval activities or advanced underwater technology. What he found only deepened the mystery. Reports of strange sonar readings, unexplained underwater disturbances, and missing research vessels dotted the maritime records going back decades. Most curious were the gaps in official documentation, periods where routine naval reports simply stopped mentioning certain areas of the Pacific. His friend Tom Rodriguez noticed the change in Jack's behavior immediately. The normally outgoing pilot had become withdrawn, jumpy, and obsessed with reading technical journals about marine engineering and underwater exploration. When Tom finally confronted him about it, Jack's response was evasive and troubled. "Tom, what would you do if you discovered something that could change everything we know about our own military?" Jack asked one evening as they sat in the officers' mess hall. "Something so big that people are willing to destroy careers to keep it hidden?" Tom studied his friend's face, recognizing the intensity that had gotten Jack into trouble throughout their careers. "I'd be very careful about who I trusted," he replied slowly, "and I'd make sure I had solid evidence before making any accusations." Jack nodded grimly. Evidence was exactly what he lacked. His photographs had been confiscated, his flight logs altered, and his official report sanitized. On paper, nothing unusual had happened during that patrol mission. But Jack knew what he had seen, and he was determined to prove it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching at the University of California's Marine Biology Department, Jack struck up a conversation with Dr. Sarah Chen, an oceanographer who specialized in underwater acoustics. When he carefully described some unusual sonar patterns he claimed to have heard about, her reaction was immediate and alarmed. "You're describing something impossible," Dr. Chen said, pulling out a thick folder of research notes. "Those acoustic signatures would require technology that doesn't exist. At least technology that isn't supposed to exist." She explained that her research team had been detecting similar anomalous readings for months, always in the same general area of the Pacific that Jack had flown over. The Navy had repeatedly denied her requests for access to investigate, claiming the area was used for classified weapons testing. But the acoustic signatures didn't match any known weapon systems. The patterns suggest massive objects moving in perfect formation underwater, Dr. Chen continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Objects the size of aircraft carriers but moving with the agility of dolphins. It's like someone has developed a completely new form of underwater propulsion. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Here was independent confirmation that something extraordinary was happening in those waters. Dr. Chen's scientific data provided the credibility his own eyewitness account lacked. More importantly, she had been asking the same questions that had gotten him into trouble. Over the following weeks, Jack and Dr. Chen began working together secretly. Combining her acoustic data with his knowledge of naval operations, they discovered that the unusual readings coincided with periods when certain high-ranking naval officers made unscheduled trips to classified facilities. Supply requisitions showed massive amounts of rare metals and advanced electronics being delivered to underwater research stations that didn't officially exist. The conspiracy was becoming clearer, but it was also becoming more dangerous. Dr. Chen reported that her research funding had been mysteriously cut, and her access to certain databases had been revoked. Jack noticed that his duty assignments were being modified to keep him away from the Pacific patrol routes. Someone was systematically isolating anyone who had come too close to the truth. The situation escalated when Dr. Chen's research assistant, a graduate student named Mike Thompson, disappeared while conducting a routine underwater survey near the restricted area. Official reports claimed he had suffered equipment failure and drowned, but his body was never recovered. Dr. Chen was devastated and terrified, but she was also more determined than ever to uncover what was being hidden. Mike was the best diver I ever worked with, she told Jack during one of their clandestine meetings. His equipment was checked and double-checked. There's no way it failed on its own. Jack realized that they were dealing with people who would go to extreme lengths to protect their secret. The thought that Mike Thompson might have been murdered to prevent him from discovering the truth sent chills down his spine. But it also hardened his resolve to expose whatever was happening beneath those Pacific waters. The turning point came when Dr. Chen managed to obtain sonar recordings from a fishing boat that had strayed into the restricted area. The captain, a grizzled veteran named Pete Kowalski, had been threatened by Coast Guard officials and ordered to delete his records. But Pete was suspicious of authority figures and had secretly kept copies of the most interesting readings. When Jack and Dr. Chen analyzed Pete's sonar data, they found something that made their blood run cold. The underwater objects weren't just moving in formation. They were communicating with each other using acoustic signals that followed patterns unlike anything in nature. The mathematical precision of these signals suggested an intelligence far more advanced than conventional military technology. "This isn't human," Dr. Chen whispered as they studied the acoustic patterns late one night in her laboratory. "The complexity of these communication protocols is beyond our current capabilities. It's like listening to a conversation in a language we don't understand, conducted by beings with vastly superior technology." Jack stared at the data, feeling the pieces of an impossible puzzle beginning to fall into place. The Navy wasn't just hiding advanced technology. They were hiding contact with something that shouldn't exist according to everything humanity understood about life on Earth. The implications were staggering and terrifying as they prepared to dig deeper into the mystery. Neither Jack nor Dr. Chen realized that their investigation had already been detected by the very people they were trying to expose. Hidden surveillance equipment had been monitoring their meetings, and their communications were being intercepted by agencies that officially didn't exist. The next phase of their investigation would require them to take enormous risks, venturing into waters where people had already died to protect the Navy's most closely guarded secret. But Jack Morrison had never backed down from a challenge, and he wasn't about to start now, even if the truth they were pursuing might change everything humanity believed about its place in the universe. The midnight phone call that changed everything came on a cold October evening. Jack Morrison was reviewing flight manuals in his quarters when his secure line rang, the tone reserved for emergency communications. The voice on the other end belonged to Commander Patricia Wells, a naval intelligence officer he had met briefly during advanced training exercises. "Morrison, I need to see you immediately. Building 7, basement level, room B12, come alone, and make sure you're not followed." The line went dead before Jack could ask any questions. Building 7 was one of the older structures on the base, officially used for storage but rumored to house intelligence operations. Jack had never been inside, and the idea of meeting a naval intelligence officer in its basement at midnight sent warning signals through his mind. But his curiosity about the Pacific mystery outweighed his caution. The basement hallway was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Room B12 turned out to be a small briefing room equipped with sophisticated electronics and walls that looked designed to prevent eavesdropping. Commander Wells was waiting for him, along with 2 other officers he didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim and urgent. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," Wells began without preamble, "you've stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than you realize. What you saw during your unauthorized flight was just the tip of an iceberg that could sink careers, topple governments, and potentially threaten national security if mishandled." Jack felt his mouth go dry. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're referring to." Wells smiled grimly and activated a large monitor on the wall. The screen displayed underwater photographs that took Jack's breath away. The images showed massive metallic structures unlike anything he had ever seen, clearly artificial but following design principles that seemed impossible according to human engineering standards. These photographs were taken by deep-sea exploration teams working under the highest levels of classification, Wells explained. What you witnessed from the air was the surface manifestation of the most significant discovery in human history. We are not alone, Morrison, and we haven't been alone for a very long time. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Jack stared at the photographs, recognizing some of the geometric patterns he had seen creating disturbances on the ocean surface. But these images revealed the full scope of what lay beneath the waves, an underwater installation of staggering size and complexity. "The structures you're looking at are not of human origin," continued one of the other officers, a man who introduced himself only as Agent Parker. "Our best estimates suggest they've been there for decades, possibly longer. The acoustic communications Dr. Chen detected are real, and they represent an intelligence far superior to our own." Jack's mind raced with questions, but Wells held up a hand to forestall his interruptions. "The reason we're telling you this is because your investigation, combined with Dr. Chen's research, has attracted attention from parties who would prefer this information never become public. You're both in danger, and the situation is deteriorating rapidly." She explained that a faction within the government had been suppressing evidence of the underwater installations for years, arguing that public revelation would cause mass panic and social collapse. Meanwhile, another faction believed that humanity had a right to know about the discovery, and that contact with the intelligence behind the structures could advance human technology and understanding by centuries. "The problem," Agent Parker added, "is that neither faction can agree on how to proceed, and both are willing to eliminate threats to their position. Dr. Chen's research assistant didn't die in an accident. He was killed because he got too close to physical evidence of the installations." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of evidence? Wells activated another set of images on the monitor. These showed fragments of metallic materials with crystalline structures that defied analysis by conventional means. The metal seemed to shift and change at the molecular level, displaying properties that violated known laws of physics. Mike Thompson managed to retrieve several pieces of this material from the seafloor before he was discovered, Wells explained. "The preliminary analysis suggests technology that operates on principles we don't understand. It's not just advanced, it's revolutionary in ways that could transform every aspect of human civilization." The third officer, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "The question is whether humanity is ready for this knowledge. Some argue that revealing the existence of superior intelligence would destroy human confidence and initiative. Others believe that contact could solve our energy problems, environmental crises, and open pathways to space exploration we never imagined possible." Jack realized he was being recruited for something, but he wasn't sure what. "What do you want from me?" "We need someone with your skills and clearance level to help us gather more information," Wells replied. "The conservative faction has been restricting access to the installation sites, claiming they're dangerous. But we believe they're simply afraid of losing control over the discovery. We need photographic evidence and detailed reconnaissance data that can't be dismissed or suppressed." Agent Parker leaned forward intensely. "You're uniquely qualified for this mission, Morrison. You've already seen the surface manifestations. You have the piloting skills necessary for low-altitude reconnaissance, and your curiosity about the truth has already been demonstrated. Most importantly, you're not part of the existing power structure that's fighting over control of this information. The weight of the decision pressed down on Jack like a physical force. Accepting their proposal would mean deliberately defying direct orders from his superiors, risking court-martial and imprisonment, and potentially putting his life in danger. But the alternative was to walk away from the most significant discovery in human history and allow others to decide humanity's future without input from the people who would be most affected. Dr. Chen has agreed to provide technical support for the mission, Wells added. Her expertise in underwater acoustics and marine technology will be essential for understanding what we find. But we need a pilot willing to take risks that go far beyond normal military operations. Jack thought about Mike Thompson, the graduate student who had died pursuing the truth. He thought about the massive underwater structures that challenged everything he believed about human achievement and our place in the universe. Most of all, he thought about the possibility that a small group of government officials were making decisions that could affect the entire course of human development. If I agree to this, Jack said slowly, I want guarantees that any information we gather will be made available to the scientific community and the public. I won't risk my life to help one faction gain advantage over another in some political power struggle. Wells exchanged glances with her colleagues before nodding. That's exactly the kind of thinking we hoped you would demonstrate. The truth belongs to everyone, not just to those with security clearances and government positions. As the meeting concluded and plans began to take shape for an unauthorized reconnaissance mission that would violate every protocol in the Naval Handbook, Jack Morrison realized that his life had taken a turn from which there would be no return. He was no longer just a Navy pilot following orders. He had become a seeker of truth in a world where truth was the most dangerous commodity of all. The mission they were planning would require him to fly lower and take greater risks than any training had prepared him for. But the potential rewards, both for humanity and for his own understanding of reality, made the dangers seem worthwhile. Whatever intelligence had built those underwater installations, it was time for humanity to know about its existence. The unauthorized mission launched on a moonless Tuesday night in November. Jack Morrison sat in the cockpit of a modified F-8 Crusader, its standard equipment replaced with sophisticated reconnaissance cameras and Dr. Chen's custom-built acoustic monitoring devices. The aircraft had been secretly prepared in a hangar far from the main base operations, using equipment that officially didn't exist and funding that came from black budget sources. Commander, Wells had arranged for the mission to coincide with a scheduled training exercise that would mask Jack's radar signature and provide cover for his unauthorized deviation from approved flight paths. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Jack would fly low over the restricted waters during the confusion of the night exercise, gather as much photographic and acoustic evidence as possible, then return before his absence was noticed. Dr. Chen waited in the mission control room they had established in an abandoned radar facility, monitoring multiple screens that would track Jack's progress and analyze data in real time. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the equipment, knowing that this mission represented either the breakthrough they had been seeking or the end of all their careers. Condor 1, this is base. You are clear for takeoff, came Wells's voice over the secure communication channel they had established. Weather conditions are optimal, and the training exercise has begun. You have approximately 90 minutes before sunrise makes concealment impossible. Jack's takeoff was smooth and silent, the modified engines producing less noise than standard military aircraft. As he climbed to cruising altitude, he felt the familiar rush of flying, combined with an electric anticipation of what he might discover. Below him, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, its surface reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. The flight to the restricted area took 23 minutes, and Jack used the time to review the mission parameters one final time. His primary objective was to photograph the underwater installations from multiple angles, using new camera equipment that could penetrate deeper into the water than conventional systems. Secondary objectives included recording acoustic communications between the structures and gathering any evidence of surface activity. As he approached the designated coordinates, Jack's instruments began detecting the same anomalous readings he had encountered during his first discovery flight. But this time, armed with Dr. Chen's advanced monitoring equipment, he could see the full scope of what was happening beneath the waves. The acoustic signatures were not random. They formed complex patterns that suggested an organized communication network spanning dozens of square miles. "Base, this is Condor 1, Jack reported quietly. "I'm reading massive acoustic activity. The communication patterns are even more complex than Dr. Chen's previous recordings suggested. It's like listening to an entire city conducting conversations simultaneously." Jack descended to barely 300 feet above the ocean surface, low enough for his cameras to capture detailed images of the underwater structures. What he saw through his viewfinder defied comprehension. The installations weren't just large. They were vast beyond imagination, stretching across the seafloor like underwater metropolises. Crystalline spires rose from central hubs, connected by what appeared to be transportation tubes that pulsed with internal light. Most remarkable was the movement. The structures weren't static. They were alive with activity. Smaller objects, each roughly the size of a city bus, moved between the larger installations with purpose and precision. Their movement patterns suggested intelligence and coordination far beyond any human technology. "Base, you need to see this," Jack whispered into his microphone, his voice filled with awe. "These aren't just installations. They're cities. Underwater cities with populations that appear to be in the millions." Dr. Chen's voice crackled back through the communication system, tight with excitement and fear. "Jack, the acoustic readings are off the charts. Whatever intelligence is down there, it's noticed your presence. The communication patterns have changed completely. They know you're watching them." Suddenly, Jack's instruments began registering movement from the depths. The smaller objects he had been observing started rising through the water column at incredible speed, far faster than any submarine or underwater vehicle he knew about. Within seconds, they breached the surface around his aircraft, revealing themselves to be craft that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The objects were sleek and seamless, with no visible propulsion systems yet capable of moving through air as easily as they had moved through water. They arranged themselves in a perfect formation around Jack's aircraft, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply observing. Through his cockpit windows, Jack could see surfaces that seemed to shift between metallic and translucent, as if the craft were made of materials that existed in multiple states simultaneously. "Base, I've got company," Jack reported, trying to keep his voice steady. "Multiple unidentified craft have surfaced and are maintaining formation around my position. They appear to be studying me." The next few minutes passed in surreal silence. The craft accompanying Jack's aircraft made no aggressive moves, but their presence was both magnificent and terrifying. He could see no occupants through what might have been windows, but he had the distinct impression that he was being examined by intelligences far superior to his own. Dr. Chen's monitoring equipment was recording everything, but the data streaming back to base defied analysis. The craft around Jack were generating energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible, manipulating electromagnetic fields in ways that violated established physics. Whatever technology they represented was centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of human capabilities. "Jack, you need to return immediately." Commander Wells's voice cut through the scientific wonderment. "We're detecting military aircraft approaching your position. Someone knows about the mission, and they're sending interceptors to stop you." Jack looked at his fuel gauges and navigation instruments, calculating whether he could complete his photographic mission before the approaching aircraft arrived. The decision was made for him when the craft surrounding his plane began emitting a harmonic frequency that Dr. Chen's equipment detected as some form of communication attempt. "Base, they're trying to communicate with me," Jack reported. "The acoustic patterns are directed specifically at my aircraft. I think they want to establish contact." The harmonics intensified, and Jack's instruments began displaying information in ways they had never been designed to handle. Symbols appeared on his navigation screens, mathematical formulas that his training allowed him to recognize as expressions of advanced physics and engineering. It was as if the intelligence behind the underwater installations was attempting to share knowledge, offering humanity a glimpse of scientific understanding beyond its current reach. But the moment of potential first contact was shattered by the appearance of military jets on the horizon. The interceptors were flying at maximum speed toward Jack's position, and their radio communications made it clear that they had orders to force him to return to base immediately, using any means necessary. The craft surrounding Jack seemed to understand the approaching threat. Without warning, they descended back beneath the waves as quickly as they had appeared, leaving him alone in the sky with his instruments still displaying the mysterious symbols they had somehow transmitted to his aircraft. Condor 1, this is Navy Interceptor Alpha. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Failure to comply will result in your aircraft being shot down as a threat to national security. Jack knew the voice belonged to his former squadron mate, Lieutenant Rodriguez. Tom had been sent to bring him back, and the pain in his friend's voice made it clear that he understood the impossible position they were both in. Jack could either obey orders and abandon his mission, or continue investigating and force his best friend to make a decision that would haunt both of them forever. As he turned his aircraft toward home, Jack realized that the real confrontation was just beginning. The evidence he had gathered would either change human understanding of the universe or result in his disappearance like Mike Thompson. Either way, there was no turning back from the path he had chosen to follow. Jack Morrison's landing at Naval Air Station Alameda was met by a reception committee that left no doubt about the seriousness of his situation. Military police vehicles surrounded the runway, their red and blue lights casting ominous shadows across the tarmac. As his aircraft rolled to a stop, armed personnel moved to secure his plane, while officers in dress uniforms waited nearby with expressions that promised severe consequences. Commander Wells was noticeably absent from the group, and Jack realized that her faction had lost whatever internal battle had been raging over the underwater installations. The men approaching his aircraft wore the insignia of naval intelligence, but their bearing suggested they answered to authorities, far above the normal military chain of command. Lieutenant Commander Morrison announced a tall man with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of Jack's appearance. I am Admiral Harrison, Director of Naval Special Projects. You will come with us immediately for debriefing. The debriefing took place in a windowless room deep within a building Jack had never seen before. The facility appeared to have been constructed recently, with walls lined with electronic equipment designed to prevent any form of surveillance or communication with the outside world. 3 men in expensive civilian suits sat across from Jack at a metal table, their faces impassive as they reviewed files that contained far more information about his life than should have been possible to gather. Mr. Morrison, began the eldest of the 3, introducing himself only as Director Sullivan, you have created a situation that threatens the stability of international relations and potentially the security of the United States. Your unauthorized mission has documented activities that fall under the highest levels of classification, and your actions have forced us to accelerate certain plans that were not scheduled for implementation for several more years. Jack remained silent, having decided during his flight back to base that cooperation would be pointless, until he understood exactly what kind of opposition he was facing. The men across from him had the look of people who made decisions affecting millions of lives, without consulting anyone outside their small circle of influence. The installations you photographed represent a project that has been under joint international management for over 2 decades, Sullivan continued. What you interpreted as evidence of non-human intelligence is actually the result of advanced research programs involving technologies that are not yet ready for public disclosure. The lie was smoothly delivered but unconvincing to someone who had seen the impossible craft that had surrounded his aircraft. Jack had witnessed technology that operated according to principles unknown to human science, and no amount of official denial could erase what his eyes had recorded. Dr. Chen's research has been terminated, and she has been relocated to a position where her expertise can be utilized more appropriately, added the second man, who identified himself as Mr. Blake. Her acoustic data and your photographic evidence will be classified at levels that ensure they never reach public attention. The implicit threat was clear, but Jack had anticipated this response. During his flight back to base, he had used his aircraft's communication systems to transmit copies of his most important photographs and Dr. Chen's acoustic recordings to a secure server maintained by a civilian contact. The information was hidden but not destroyed, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Gentlemen, Jack said finally, breaking his silence. I've been a naval officer for 12 years. I understand the need for classified operations and military secrecy. But what I witnessed out there goes beyond national security. It represents a discovery that could change human civilization, and that's too important to be hidden by a small group of officials. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, his expression growing more threatening. Morrison, you seem to misunderstand your situation. You are not a whistleblower exposing government corruption. You are a military officer who has violated direct orders and compromised ongoing operations that affect global stability. Your choice is simple. Sign a non-disclosure agreement that ensures your silence, or face charges that will result in life imprisonment at a military facility where no one will ever find you. The room fell silent as Jack considered his options. Everything he had worked for in his military career was being threatened, but the memory of those impossible craft and the vast underwater cities made compromise seem like betrayal of humanity's future. His decision would affect not just his own life but potentially the course of human development. "I want to speak with Dr. Chen," Jack said finally. "I want confirmation that she's safe and that her cooperation wasn't obtained through coercion." Sullivan smiled coldly. "Dr. Chen has already signed her agreement and begun work on projects more suited to her talents. She understands the importance of maintaining security around sensitive research programs." At that moment, the door to the room opened, and Dr. Chen was escorted inside by 2 guards. Her appearance shocked Jack. She looked exhausted and frightened, with the hollow expression of someone who had been under enormous psychological pressure. When she saw Jack, her eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. "Dr. Chen has something to tell you," Blake announced. "Haven't you, Doctor?" Sarah Chen looked directly at Jack, her voice trembling but determined. "Jack, they showed me things. Documents, photographs, evidence that the installations are part of a decades-old research program. Everything we discovered has an explanation that doesn't involve what we thought it involved." Jack studied his friend's face, recognizing the signs of someone speaking under duress. But hidden in her words was a message that only he would understand. During their weeks of research together, they had developed a code for discussing sensitive information in public settings. Dr. Chen was telling him that she had been coerced into cooperation but had not revealed everything. They had discovered together. "The acoustic signatures we detected," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "were generated by experimental propulsion systems being tested by joint international research teams. The communication patterns were computer-generated protocols for coordinating multiple underwater vehicles. The explanation was technically plausible, but didn't account for the mathematical formulas that had appeared on Jack's instrument panels during his encounter with the craft. Those symbols had represented knowledge far beyond current human capabilities, transmitted by an intelligence that understood physics in ways that human science had not yet achieved. "I understand," Jack said carefully, meeting Dr. Chen's eyes and seeing the same determination that had driven their investigation. "If that's the official explanation, then I suppose I was mistaken about what I observed." Sullivan looked pleased with Jack's apparent capitulation. "Excellent. We're prepared to offer you continued service with appropriate security clearances and assignments that will make good use of your skills. Your record will reflect commendations for identifying security vulnerabilities in our reconnaissance procedures." As the meeting concluded and Jack was presented with documents to sign, he realized that his real mission was just beginning. The authorities who had captured him believed they had contained the situation, but they had underestimated both his determination and his preparation. The evidence he had gathered was still safely hidden, waiting for the right opportunity to be revealed. Jack signed the non-disclosure agreement with a steady hand, knowing that his signature was meaningless if the survival of human knowledge was at stake. The men across from him relaxed visibly, believing they had successfully neutralized another potential threat to their carefully maintained secret. They had no idea that Jack Morrison had spent years learning to think several steps ahead of his opponents, a skill that had kept him alive during dangerous missions and would now serve him in an even more perilous undertaking. Over the following weeks, Jack played the role of a reformed officer who had learned his lesson about following orders. He accepted his new assignment to a desk job in naval logistics, far from any operational aircraft or sensitive missions. His superiors believed they had effectively sidelined him, relegating him to pushing paperwork and staying away from anything that might reignite his curiosity about underwater installations. But Jack's apparent compliance was an elaborate deception. During his off-duty hours, he carefully researched the men who had interrogated him, tracing their connections through military databases and civilian records. What he discovered confirmed his worst suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy he had uncovered. Director Sullivan and his colleagues were part of an organization that existed in the shadows between military intelligence, civilian government, and private industry. They controlled budgets that didn't appear in official records, managed projects that had no parliamentary oversight, and made decisions that affected millions of people without any form of democratic accountability. The underwater installations were just one of many secrets they maintained, part of a larger agenda that involved suppressing technological advances that could disrupt existing power structures. More disturbing was Jack's discovery that similar suppression efforts had been ongoing for decades. Inventors who had developed revolutionary energy systems had seen their patents classified and their research confiscated. Scientists who had made breakthroughs in propulsion technology had been recruited into black projects or had mysteriously died in accidents. The pattern suggested a deliberate effort to control the pace of human technological development, ensuring that certain advances remained in the hands of a small group of controllers. The breakthrough in Jack's investigation came when he managed to contact Dr. Chen through a secure communication channel they had established before her capture. She had been relocated to a research facility in Nevada, where she was working on projects that officially didn't exist. But she had maintained her determination to expose the truth, and she had been gathering evidence from inside the system that had tried to silence her. "Jack, it's worse than we imagined," she told him during their first clandestine conversation. "The technology I've seen here is decades ahead of anything in public use. They have energy sources that could eliminate fossil fuels, propulsion systems that could revolutionize transportation, and communication technologies that could connect the entire world instantaneously. But they're keeping it all locked away." Dr. Chen explained that the underwater installations were indeed connected to non-human intelligence, but the relationship was far more complex than simple contact or cooperation. The technology being suppressed had been reverse engineered from artifacts and information provided by the beings behind the installations, but the knowledge was being withheld from humanity, while a small group of officials decided how to use it for their own advantage. "They're not protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge," she continued. "They're protecting their own power from technologies that would make their control obsolete. Clean energy would eliminate the oil industry. Advanced propulsion would revolutionize transportation. Communication technologies would make information control impossible. They're suppressing the future to maintain the present." Jack felt a cold anger building as he understood the full scope of what was being hidden from humanity. The installations he had discovered represented not just evidence of non-human intelligence, but proof that solutions to humanity's greatest challenges already existed and were being deliberately withheld. Millions of people continued to suffer from energy poverty, environmental degradation, and technological limitations, while revolutionary solutions sat locked in underground facilities. The time for careful investigation and gradual revelation had passed. Jack realized that only dramatic action could break through the wall of secrecy and denial that surrounded the underwater installations and their implications for human civilization. He began planning an operation that would expose the truth in a way that could not be suppressed or denied, regardless of the personal consequences he would face. His plan would require him to access the hidden evidence he had transmitted during his unauthorized flight, combine it with Dr. Chen's inside information, and find a way to broadcast the revelations to news organizations around the world simultaneously. The technical challenges were enormous, but Jack had always thrived when facing impossible odds. As he prepared for what might be his final mission, Jack Morrison understood that he was no longer fighting just for his own vindication, or even for scientific truth. He was fighting for humanity's right to its own future, against forces that were willing to sacrifice human potential to maintain their grip on power. The young pilot, who had simply wanted to understand some unusual readings on his instruments, had become something far more dangerous to the established order. A man who refused to accept that truth should be the privilege of the few, rather than the birthright of all humanity. The plan Jack Morrison developed over the next month was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. He would simultaneously release evidence to major news organizations across 6 different countries, ensuring that no single government could suppress the revelations through pressure or intimidation. The coordinated disclosure would include his photographic evidence, Dr. Chen's acoustic recordings, and documented proof of the conspiracy to suppress revolutionary technologies. But executing the plan required resources and expertise that Jack couldn't access alone. He needed allies who shared his commitment to truth, and possessed the technical skills necessary to bypass the sophisticated monitoring systems that surrounded anyone connected to the underwater installations. Finding such allies without alerting the authorities who watched his every move would require careful planning and considerable risk. The solution came from an unexpected source. Commander Wells, who had disappeared after Jack's capture, contacted him through an encrypted message hidden in what appeared to be routine military correspondence. She had not been eliminated or reassigned. Instead, she had gone underground, organizing a network of military and civilian personnel who shared Jack's determination to expose the suppressed technologies. "Morrison, you're not alone in this fight," her message read when decoded. "There are more of us than you know, people in positions throughout the government and military who understand what's at stake. We've been waiting for the right moment to act, and your evidence provides the catalyst we need." Wells arranged a clandestine meeting at an abandoned warehouse near the San Francisco docks, where Jack discovered that the resistance movement was far larger and more sophisticated than he had imagined. The group included high-ranking military officers, civilian scientists, investigative journalists, and former government officials who had been marginalized for asking inconvenient questions about classified projects. Dr. Marcus Williams, a former NASA engineer who had been blacklisted for attempting to publish research on advanced propulsion systems, explained the scope of what they were fighting against. The suppression network extends beyond the military into every major institution that could potentially develop or publicize breakthrough technologies. Universities receive funding contingent on avoiding certain research areas. Corporations find their patents classified or their facilities raided if they get too close to revolutionary discoveries. Another member of the group, investigative journalist Rebecca Martinez, had spent years documenting cases of scientists and inventors who had disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances after making significant breakthroughs. Her research revealed a pattern of systematic elimination that stretched back decades, suggesting that the suppression of advanced technologies was not a recent development but a long-standing policy implemented by powerful interests. The underwater installations you discovered are just one part of a much larger picture, Martinez explained. There are facilities around the world where reverse-engineered technologies are being developed and tested. But instead of benefiting humanity, these advances are being weaponized or used to maintain the economic and political status quo. Jack learned that his reconnaissance mission had been even more successful than he had realized. The mathematical formulas that had appeared on his instruments during his encounter with the non-human craft contained information that Dr. Williams and other scientists in the group had been able to partially decode. The knowledge represented advances in physics and engineering that could revolutionize every aspect of human civilization. What you documented proves that peaceful contact with advanced intelligence is possible, Dr. Williams told Jack during one of their planning sessions. The craft that surrounded your aircraft made no aggressive moves despite having technology that could have easily destroyed you. They seem to be attempting to share knowledge, offering humanity a gift that our own authorities are refusing to accept. The group's plan was comprehensive and carefully coordinated. They would release Jack's evidence simultaneously through news organizations in the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Australia, and Brazil, ensuring global coverage that no single government could contain. Supporting documentation would be provided to scientific journals and posted on secure servers around the world. Most importantly, the release would include a comprehensive analysis of the suppressed technologies and their potential benefits for solving humanity's most pressing problems. Dr. Chen's role in the plan was crucial but dangerous. She would need to access classified databases from her position within the Nevada Research Facility, downloading additional evidence while avoiding detection by the sophisticated monitoring systems that surrounded her work. The risk of discovery was enormous, but the potential impact of the information she could provide made the danger worthwhile. I've identified files that document decades of technological suppression, Dr. Chen reported during a secure communication session. Energy systems that could provide clean power for the entire planet, medical technologies that could eliminate most diseases, transportation methods that could make space exploration routine. All of it locked away while humanity struggles with problems that already have solutions. As the release date approached, Jack felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. The evidence they were preparing to reveal would not just expose government secrecy, it would fundamentally challenge humanity's understanding of its place in. Revolutionary energy systems had seen their patents classified and their research confiscated. Scientists who had made breakthroughs in propulsion technology had been recruited into black projects or had mysteriously died in accidents. The pattern suggested a deliberate effort to control the pace of human technological development, ensuring that certain advances remained in the hands of a small group of controllers. The breakthrough in Jack's investigation came when he managed to contact Dr. Chen through a secure communication channel they had established before her capture. She had been relocated to a research facility in Nevada, where she was working on projects that officially didn't exist, but she had maintained her determination to expose the truth, and she had been gathering evidence from inside the system that had tried to silence her. "Jack, it's worse than we imagined," she told him during their first clandestine conversation. "The technology I've seen here is decades ahead of anything in public use. They have energy sources that could eliminate fossil fuels, propulsion systems that could revolutionize transportation, and communication technologies that could connect the entire world instantaneously, but they're keeping it all locked away." Dr. Chen explained that the underwater installations were indeed connected to non-human intelligence, but the relationship was far more complex than simple contact or cooperation. The technology being suppressed had been reverse-engineered from artifacts and information provided by the beings behind the installations. But the knowledge was being withheld from humanity, while a small group of officials decided how to use it for their own advantage. "They're not protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge," she continued. "They're protecting their own power from technologies that would make their control obsolete. Clean energy would eliminate the oil industry. Advanced propulsion would revolutionize transportation. Communication technologies would make information control impossible. They're suppressing the future to maintain the present." Jack felt a cold anger building as he understood the full scope of what was being hidden from humanity. The installations he had discovered represented not just evidence of non-human intelligence, but proof that solutions to humanity's greatest challenges already existed and were being deliberately withheld. Millions of people continued to suffer from energy poverty, environmental degradation, and technological limitations, while revolutionary solutions sat locked in underground facilities. The time for careful investigation and gradual revelation had passed. Jack realized that only dramatic action could break through the wall of secrecy and denial that surrounded the underwater installations and their implications for human civilization. He began planning an operation that would expose the truth in a way that could not be suppressed or denied, regardless of the personal consequences he would face. His plan would require him to access the hidden evidence he had transmitted during his unauthorized flight, combine it with Dr. Chen's inside information, and find a way to broadcast the revelations to news organizations around the world simultaneously. The technical challenges were enormous, but Jack had always thrived when facing impossible odds. As he prepared for what might be his final mission, Jack Morrison understood that he was no longer fighting just for his own vindication or even for scientific truth. He was fighting for humanity's right to its own future, against forces that were willing to sacrifice human potential to maintain their grip on power. The young pilot who had simply wanted to understand some unusual readings on his instruments had become something far more dangerous to the established order. A man who refused to accept that truth should be the privilege of the few, rather than the birthright of all humanity. The plan Jack Morrison developed over the next month was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. He would simultaneously release evidence to major news organizations across 6 different countries, ensuring that no single government could suppress the revelations through pressure or intimidation. The coordinated disclosure would include his photographic evidence, Dr. Chen's acoustic recordings, and documented proof of the conspiracy to suppress revolutionary technologies. But executing the plan required resources and expertise that Jack couldn't access alone. He needed allies who shared his commitment to truth and possessed the technical skills necessary to bypass the sophisticated monitoring systems that surrounded anyone connected to the underwater installations. Finding such allies without alerting the authorities who watched his every move would require careful planning and considerable risk. The solution came from an unexpected source. Commander Wells, who had disappeared after Jack's capture, contacted him through an encrypted message hidden in what appeared to be routine military correspondence. She had not been eliminated or reassigned. Instead, she had gone underground, organizing a network of military and civilian personnel who shared Jack's determination to expose the suppressed technologies. "Morrison, you're not alone in this fight," her message read when decoded. "There are more of us than you know. People in positions throughout the government and military who understand what's at stake. We've been waiting for the right moment to act, and your evidence provides the catalyst we need." Wells arranged a clandestine meeting at an abandoned warehouse near the San Francisco docks, where Jack discovered that the resistance movement was far larger and more sophisticated than he had imagined. The group included high-ranking military officers, civilian scientists, investigative journalists, and former government officials who had been marginalized for asking inconvenient questions about classified projects. Dr. Marcus Williams, a former NASA engineer who had been blacklisted for attempting to publish research on advanced propulsion systems, explained the scope of what they were fighting against. The suppression network extends beyond the military into every major institution that could potentially develop or publicize breakthrough technologies. Universities receive funding contingent on avoiding certain research areas. Corporations find their patents classified or their facilities raided if they get too close to revolutionary discoveries. Another member of the group, investigative journalist Rebecca Martinez, had spent years documenting cases of scientists and inventors who had disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances after making significant breakthroughs. Her research revealed a pattern of systematic elimination that stretched back decades, suggesting that the suppression of advanced technologies was not a recent development but a long-standing policy implemented by powerful interests. "The underwater installations you discovered are just one part of a much larger picture," Martinez explained. "There are facilities around the world where reverse-engineered technologies are being developed and tested. But instead of benefiting humanity, these advances are being weaponized or used to maintain the economic and political status quo." Jack learned that his reconnaissance mission had been even more successful than he had realized. The mathematical formulas that had appeared on his instruments during his encounter with the non-human craft contained information that Dr. Williams and other scientists in the group had been able to partially decode. The knowledge represented advances in physics and engineering that could revolutionize every aspect of human civilization. "What you documented proves that peaceful contact with advanced intelligence is possible," Dr. Williams told Jack during one of their planning sessions. "The craft that surrounded your aircraft made no aggressive moves despite having technology that could have easily destroyed you. They seem to be attempting to share knowledge, offering humanity a gift that our own authorities are refusing to accept." The group's plan was comprehensive and carefully coordinated. They would release Jack's evidence simultaneously through news organizations in the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Australia, and Brazil, ensuring global coverage that no single government could contain. Supporting documentation would be provided to scientific journals and posted on secure servers around the world. Most importantly, the release would include a comprehensive analysis of the suppressed technologies and their potential benefits for solving humanity's most pressing problems. Dr. Chen's role in the plan was crucial but dangerous. She would need to access classified databases from her position within the Nevada Research Facility, downloading additional evidence while avoiding detection by the sophisticated monitoring systems that surrounded her work. The risk of discovery was enormous, but the potential impact of the information she could provide made the danger worthwhile. "I've identified files that document decades of technological suppression," Dr. Chen reported during a secure communication session. "Energy systems that could provide clean power for the entire planet, medical technologies that could eliminate most diseases, transportation methods that could make space exploration routine. All of it locked away while humanity struggles with problems that already have solutions." As the release date approached, Jack felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. The evidence they were preparing to reveal would not just expose government secrecy, it would fundamentally challenge humanity's understanding of its place in the universe and its potential for technological advancement. The revelations would inspire some people and terrify others, potentially causing social upheaval that could take generations to resolve. But the alternative, Allowing the suppression to continue while millions of people suffered from problems that could be solved with existing technology was morally unacceptable. Jack had joined the Navy to serve his country and protect his fellow citizens. Now he realized that true service meant protecting humanity's future from those who would sacrifice it for their own advantage. The night before the planned release, Jack received an encrypted message that chilled him to the bone. The suppression network had detected unusual activity around several of the resistance group's members. Dr. Chen's access to classified databases had been noticed, and security teams were moving to investigate her activities. Commander Wells reported that some of their allies had been arrested on fabricated charges, and surveillance around Jack himself had intensified dramatically. "They know we're planning something big," Wells warned during their final communication. "Tomorrow's release may be our only chance to get the truth out before they shut us down completely. Are you ready to go through with this, knowing that it might cost us everything?" Jack looked out his apartment window at the lights of the city below, thinking about all the people who would be affected by the revelations they were about to make public. Some would be excited by the possibilities that advanced technology could offer. Others would be angry about the deception that had kept these possibilities hidden. Many would be frightened by the implications of contact with non-human intelligence. But humanity deserved to make its own choices about its future, based on complete information rather than the filtered truth that those in power deemed safe. The time for secrecy and suppression had ended. Tomorrow everything would change, and Jack Morrison would either be remembered as the pilot who helped humanity reach for the stars, or as the man who destroyed civilization by revealing truths it wasn't ready to handle. Either way, there was no turning back from the path he had chosen to follow. The coordinated release began at exactly 6 a.m. Eastern Time on a Tuesday morning in December 1962. Across 6 continents, major news organizations simultaneously published Jack Morrison's photographs, Dr. Chen's acoustic recordings, and comprehensive documentation of the conspiracy to suppress revolutionary technologies. The London Times, New York Tribune, Le Monde, Tokyo Daily News, Sydney Herald, and São Paulo Globe all featured identical front-page headlines. Navy pilot exposes evidence of advanced underwater civilization. Jack watched the first television news reports from a safe house in the mountains outside San Francisco, surrounded by members of the resistance group who had worked tirelessly to make the revelation possible. The initial reaction from government officials was predictable: denial, claims of fabricated evidence, and accusations that foreign agents had created the materials to undermine Western security. But the evidence was too comprehensive and too well documented to be easily dismissed. Independent experts quickly confirmed that Jack's photographs showed structures and technology that exceeded current human capabilities. Dr. Chen's acoustic recordings were analyzed by marine biologists and oceanographers around the world, all of whom verified that the communication patterns indicated intelligence far beyond any known marine life. Within hours of the first publications, additional witnesses began coming forward, with their own encounters with unexplained phenomena. In the Pacific Ocean, commercial fishermen reported sonar contacts with massive objects that moved too fast and too precisely to be conventional submarines. Merchant sailors described lights beneath the waves that formed geometric patterns and moved in coordinated formations. Navy personnel, speaking anonymously, confirmed that unusual activities in restricted waters had been ongoing for years. The reaction from the scientific community was immediate and overwhelming. Universities around the world announced new research programs to study the implications of the revelations. The mathematical formulas that had appeared on Jack's instruments were analyzed by physicists who declared them to represent advances in theoretical science that could revolutionize human understanding of energy, propulsion, and communication. Dr. Marcus Williams, now speaking publicly for the first time in years, held a press conference where he explained the potential benefits of the suppressed technologies. The energy systems documented in these files could provide clean, unlimited power for the entire planet within a decade, he announced to a packed auditorium of journalists and scientists. The propulsion technologies could make space exploration as routine as air travel. The communication methods could connect every human being on Earth instantaneously. But the revelations also triggered a massive government crackdown. Within 48 hours of the release, dozens of military and civilian personnel connected to the underwater installations were arrested on charges ranging from treason to espionage. Facilities where reverse-engineered technologies were being developed were placed under martial law. Research scientists working on classified projects found themselves confined to their laboratories under armed guard. Dr. Chen's situation became particularly perilous when security teams at the Nevada facility discovered her unauthorized access to classified databases. She managed to transmit a final batch of documents before being taken into custody, but her fate remained unknown as government officials refused to acknowledge that she was being held or to specify the charges against her. Jack himself became the target of an international manhunt as authorities sought to discredit him and suppress further revelations. Official statements described him as a mentally unstable pilot who had fabricated evidence to gain attention, despite the fact that independent analysis had confirmed the authenticity of his materials. Warrants were issued for his arrest on charges of espionage and theft of classified information. The public reaction to the revelations was complex and often contradictory. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of contact with non-human intelligence. Environmental activists demanded immediate release of the clean energy technologies that could end dependence on fossil fuels. Military analysts worried about the strategic implications of advanced propulsion systems falling into the wrong hands. Perhaps most significantly, the revelations sparked a global debate about government secrecy and the right of humanity to know about discoveries that could affect its future. Protests erupted in major cities around the world, with demonstrators demanding full disclosure of all suppressed technologies and accountability for officials who had hidden them from public knowledge. The underwater installations themselves became the focus of intense international attention. Independent research vessels from multiple countries converged on the Pacific coordinates Jack had photographed, despite attempts by various navies to maintain the exclusion zones. The resulting standoffs created diplomatic crises as different nations demanded access to study the installations and their implications for human development. 3 months after the initial release, Jack Morrison emerged from hiding to testify before an emergency session of the United Nations General Assembly. Security was unprecedented as he presented additional evidence and answered questions from representatives of 193 nations. His testimony was broadcast live around the world, watched by an estimated 2 billion people. The choice facing humanity is simple, Jack told the assembled delegates. We can continue to allow a small group of officials to control our technological development, keeping revolutionary advances locked away while millions of people suffer from problems that already have solutions. Or we can embrace the knowledge that has been offered to us and use it to build a better future for all of humanity. The UN session resulted in the passage of Resolution 1847, calling for the establishment of an International Technology Disclosure Commission with authority to investigate suppressed technologies and ensure their benefits were shared globally. The resolution passed by an overwhelming margin, despite opposition from several major powers whose secret programs were threatened by the proposed transparency. Jack's testimony also revealed the ultimate fate of the underwater installations. Following the global publicity, the non-human intelligence behind the structures had begun more direct communication with human researchers. Mathematical formulas and technological blueprints were being transmitted directly to scientific institutions around the world, bypassing government control entirely. They seem to understand that humanity is ready for this knowledge, Jack explained to the UN delegates. The suppression and secrecy were human decisions, not requirements imposed by our visitors. They've been waiting for us to overcome our own fears and power struggles so that we could accept the gifts they're offering. Years later, as Jack Morrison watched the first commercial fusion power plants come online and saw spacecraft powered by revolutionary propulsion systems beginning regular missions to Mars, he reflected on the chain of events that had started with his unauthorized deviation from a routine patrol flight. The world had, indeed, changed, sometimes chaotically and painfully, but ultimately in ways that expanded human potential beyond anything previously imagined. The conspiracy to suppress advanced technologies had been broken, not by government oversight or military discipline, but by individuals who refused to accept that truth should be the privilege of the few rather than the birthright of all humanity. The pilot who had defied directives to uncover the Navy's most hidden secret had helped humanity take its first steps toward a future limited only by its imagination and courage. Dr. Chen, eventually released from custody and cleared of all charges. Established the Chen Institute for Advanced Physics, where researchers from around the world collaborated on understanding and developing the technologies that had been hidden for so long. Commander Wells was promoted to admiral and placed in charge of the new Department of Technological Transparency, ensuring that future breakthrough discoveries would be shared openly rather than suppressed. And in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the underwater installations continued their patient work, no longer hidden but now openly acknowledged as humanity's first contact with intelligence from beyond Earth. The geometric patterns that had once created mysterious disturbances on the surface had become beacons of hope, symbols of humanity's readiness to join a larger community of intelligent beings in the universe. Jack Morrison had started as a Navy pilot following orders. He had become something far more important, a guardian of humanity's future, ensuring that the species he served would never again be denied the knowledge it needed to reach for the stars.